Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Apostate Aladdin, joined today by Hani from Critical Faculty. Uh, Happy Ramadan if you celebrate Ramadan. Otherwise, I hope you're having a happy Ramadan either way. So, thank you, Hani, for joining us today.
Thanks, AA. Thank you. I've had you before on my channel, and I enjoy your demeanor quite a lot.
Thank you. I was just recently watching your latest, one of your latest live streams. Um, Damn it, I forget the person you were talking to right now. Rationality Rules.
Right,
That was an interesting live stream.
Stephen Watford. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's a brilliant
Stephen.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd like him a lot. He's I think he's got the same sort of demeanor. The way we approach things is a bit more calmer and not trying to don't want to say attack the person, but try to sort of make it subtle and because this is a very important issue for a lot of people, so you're gonna have to approach with caution, I think.
Mhm. Agreed. And hopefully, after our live stream today, if people would like to, I'd encourage them to go and subscribe to Critical Faculty's channel. His information will be in the description below. If it isn't already, I believe it already is. I have him tagged. Uh, anyway, so where do we start? I know this is a topic that has been on my mind recently a lot. Um, I am curious to know, why do you do what you do? Why do you have a YouTube channel where you talk about religion?
Right. I don't just talk about religion isn't my sole purpose, and actually faith isn't the target of mine, because I understand that faith is something that the homo sapiens human species have evolved over time, so it's very difficult to shake. It's actually, as a matter of fact, I believe faith was one of the reasons why we survived as human species at some point, which is believing without evidence. So imagine you are an earlier species of Homo sapiens, or even a Homo erectus, and you hear some rustling in the trees. You're about to go to the trees to pick the fruits, but you hear the sound coming from behind the trees, and you have no method of verifying where the sound is coming from and what could be the issuer of the sounds. So for a quick risk analysis, and I think it's a pretty wise move, you've got to believe that there's something back there that might end your life if you go. So you delay or postpone your endeavor, live for another day, grab the fruit later on, and choosing to believe that there is something out there is going to eat you if you go there. So we are the offsprings. These people have survived. Those who actually were a bit skeptical probably died at that time because, what if? So we are the offspring of those people who chose to hide or flee, and therefore believing without evidence is very persistent in the human species. So I can understand it um, quite strongly. However, this has become an obstacle now because we can now verify the sound coming from behind the trees without having to go there. You can send a drone, for example. Um, so my uh, purpose is to get people to get to a skeptical level so they can take their own journey and choose whatever they want to do. Um, uh, However, while doing that, trying to remove the harmful elements of religion, because not everything about religion is disgusting, you know. So if this is a relationship between you and your God, and it's making you feel good and balanced, it doesn't have to be true. We didn't evolve to know the truth. We evolved to survive. So if there is something that is actually your brain wiring is wired to believe, and you're a calmer person that way, you're a better person that way, and your belief does not translate into conduct that will harm others, I don't see an issue with that, right? A lot
I
of people would
remember last
disagree.
time
Yeah.
when we chatted, you had mentioned your religious background, but I'm curious. For those who don't know, you were born to a Muslim and a Christian parent, right? Like both sets.
Correct.
Um,
Yes.
does that play into why you are motivated to discuss these topics today?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. And both were not religious, you know. So my father was an ex-Muslim already by the time I was born. Of an Egyptian origin. My mother was Irish Catholic, and um, she was sort of a spiritual Catholic, you know, didn't really believe that much, but believed in it's more like a deist type of person. They're both atheists. My father died now, but he was an atheist way before I was born, and so I was born pretty much a secular home where we had a library, and in the library there was Nietzsche, there was the Bible, the Quran. I can do whatever I want. So actually, I sort of not converted, but sort of tried Islam. I took it for a ride for a couple of years between the age of I think maybe 15 and 17, and I think it was just out of rebellion because my dad was not religious, and you know what you do when you're a teenager, you gotta stand up to your dad and show him that you're the man. But only it took me about a year to 18 months for my father to laugh at me and say, "I told you so," when I, decided the whole thing was a sham.
Mhm. So it doesn't seem like it's so some people assume that you talk about religion, even though it's not the only thing that you talk about. But if you mention religion at all, then it's because you had a deep and impactful and possibly even hurtful relationship with religion in the past. But that doesn't seem to be the case with you.
No, no. To me, I'm motivated by others. Like it doesn't have to be me, just me. I haven't suffered. I didn't suffer anything because of religion, but I can see others suffer, and that's enough for me. I don't need to go through the pain myself. Like Ramadan, this is the analogy of Ramadan. You gotta fast to know how poor people would feel, and it's the most ridiculous excuse for anything. And like in what? We have evolved empathy in our prefrontal lobe cortex is something that will identify with other people, and that's how we survive again. Empathy is one of the reasons why we're here. There are evidence of older Homo sapiens who actually put a cast on somebody's broken leg, right? They haven't left them to just die and that'll be it. We have evidence that we cared for each other from before even religion was on the scene, which is about 10,000 years ago, around the agricultural era. So that's ridiculous. Morality has evolved from day one, and caring for one another has evolved from day one. Because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here. Simple as that.
Well, I softly disagree there that an emulation of what a poor person would go through is. I mean, I don't think it's absolutely necessary for empathy. I don't think it hurts either, but I don't believe that what happens during Ramadan is an emulation of what a poor person goes through. Uh, not really. Just starving yourself for half a day and then eating a lot before and a lot after is nowhere near close
Oh, I
enough
agree.
to simulating, what a poor person goes through. I think it doesn't hurt to have a reminder, but it's not really the best. I don't know. I feel like if people fast because God said you should fast, and then they try to find reasons why it's good to fast and to make sense of it. I don't take it to be a very good reason on its own.
I completely agree. That's just what some people would say, and I completely agree. It's
Hmm.
ridiculous. I mean, Ramadan. I lived in Egypt for quite some time, and Ramadan is the month of food. It's not the other way around. It's people are obsessed with food during the month of Ramadan. That you'd be having sahur, and you'd be asking your wife or your mother, "What's for breakfast tomorrow?" Because you're just so indulge in food. It's crazy how people put on weight in Ramadan.
I want to take a moment to ask you to answer this question by Give the Gospel of Jesus. Does truth exist? Does God exist? Are miracles possible? Is the New Testament true? I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Those are four questions in an unrelated statement.
That last one is a Frank Turek
Mhm.
statement. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Uh, Atheism is not faith based; it's evidence based. Faith is believing, not without evidence, without having the need for evidence. There might be some evidence, or people might call them evidence. I disagree, but you don't need them to believe. Then that's what faith is. Does truth exist? This is a very large philosophical question. This is the ontological truth. Nobody knows, and I've given up on ontology quite some time ago because it's quite futile conversation. You don't know the essence of things. We only understand things in the way we relate to. You don't know what the true essence of an apple. Um, is it food? Is it the object of the affection of a painter who's about to do some art with it? Is it the logo of a giant tech company? Is it a bridge for a little worm to pass over sort of in a muddy, watery area? So it depends on the context. You will find that the truthfulness of something means nothing unless there's something else that relates to it. So ontology for me, it's very dicey. It doesn't really advance the conversation. I'd rather stick to epistemology. I'd rather stick to how we relate to things, how do we use things, how do we improve things. So does truth exist? Yes. At least it's a relative one to our existence that we can relate to, use, and make and benefit from. Does God exist? The Abrahamic God, I can make a positive case that God does not exist. He is actually literally the married bachelor. He cannot exist because he promised certain things, yet his behavior is completely something else, unless he's not a good God. The only reason a God like that would exist is he a conniving, deceiving God, and then that sort of God you can't really believe in because you never know what he's thinking really. Are miracles possible? There is nothing illogical about the suspension of the physical realm, but it's never been witnessed. It's never been witnessed. It's never been broken before. All
I mean, what do you mean by witness, though?
or sorry, verified, maybe
Mhm.
verified, attested. Um, James Randi, the famous magician, died at the age of 92, I think, a few years ago. Issued a challenge that stood for about 30 years, $1 million. Or at the beginning, it was a big sum, but at the end of his career and life, it wasn't that huge. But for anybody to come over and prove any supernatural elements, from telepathy to clairvoyance, all that sort of stuff, the experiences are actually recorded on YouTube. You can go and have a watch yourself. Um, he brings people on a theater under controlled environment, and it's never, nobody won that prize for 30 years. There is no such thing.
But maybe he hadn't met any people who followed the right religion or the correct prophets. Maybe it was just localized to the U.S.
Oh no, it's been open. There are lots of foreigners who appeared in his experience for quite some time. So no, it was open. It was announced everywhere, and yeah. But also even the Sati Baba situation. You probably have heard Sam Harris talking about Sati Baba and his miracles and how he found to be deceiving people. Taking gold from his stomach and gave it to people, and it was all sort of sleight of hand. So no, I don't think miracles are at least I haven't seen one that's been scientifically verified, and people said, oh, we can't really explain that. That's incredible. I hear allegations of miracles, but once they get looked at, we understand the natural causes of them. Is the New Testament true? Don't think so.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
That's fine.
What I always find tricky about these perspectives is how to answer that last part of I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. The way that I think about it, the way that I claim to be an atheist, I don't like to lead with that because it comes with a lot of presumptions about what it means to be an atheist. For me, I'm not saying there is no thing that created the universe or I'm saying that the Big Bang is when time started or any of those things that theists usually presume that I'm saying. All I'm saying is the personification of a god, the idea that God has a certain personality and certain commands. I don't believe in that. Anything else is up to, I don't know. We don't, and I don't think we could ever find out. So I'm not, I don't have conviction like a theist does to say, I know the meaning of the universe, and at least it begins with this God. I don't know the meaning of the universe, and I don't claim to know. All I know is that these descriptions of God are all we've received them all from men, usually from men, not even women, but from humans. We've received most of these descriptions from a human who says, God spoke to me, secretly or in a dream or in this supernatural event that nobody else saw, or that we now have stories about people seeing, but has never been actually verified or witnessed or measured or tested. Um, so that's why I don't believe in any story about God. But I have no position on the feasibility of there being a God. I think it's sort of a waste of time, in my opinion, from my perspective, to debate back and forth whether or not there's a God. Because the part that actually matters to people is, what is that description of that God, and what does it want from me, and what does it want me to force on you? And that's the part that I take issue with.
I agree. The terms agnosticism, a lot of people don't understand it or don't understand the background of it. They think it's a 50-50 position. The term was actually coined by Thomas Huxley, who used to be called the bulldog of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was a very timid, shy person, and he never debated his theory. And Thomas Huxley was doing that for him. And agnosticism was the original meaning of agnosticism is God is unknowable. There is no way to verify if there is a God or not, and therefore you just remain agnostic on the subject forever. It's not like a 50-50 and someday you'd know. It's unknowable. God is if there is one, he's unknowable. But again, if that God has the ability to make himself clear and contact us and didn't, I think the onus is on that God to sort of tell us that he's around. It's not a big deal according to the Bible, because apparently God appeared to and was in direct conversation with Adam and Eve, and that did not stop Adam and Eve to disobey him. Looks like free will is quite intact even in the presence of God. We've got also Lucifer and Satan. Depends on your story. Did exactly the same thing, knowing exactly that he's going to burn in hellfire, even though he's made from fire, um, that he's going to burn forever. He knows his destiny, yet he took a stance. So, because this probably will challenge people about, but if God appeared to you, you will be obligated to believe. No, according to the religious narratives, there are human species and jinn species and demon species that disobey God despite his immediate presence.
Mhm. The issue I take the most with religious narratives is that we know, I mean, in Islam, for example, we're always warned about false prophets, right? And Christians always rave about this prophet is a false prophet and so on. Um, so we know that the method of transmission through prophets is one that is faulty, that is prone to being abused. Like, that is presuming that there is an actual prophet and then there's a false prophet. So we know that this method of conveying information is not foolproof, and some people will fall for false prophets. Are those people who are falling for false prophets, even if they were warned, or some of them were not warned, are they falling for false prophets, so to speak, because they're bad people who deserve to go to hell? No, they trust the method of transmission, which is believe a guy who says that God spoke to him. So it's similar to me saying that I will actually do a giveaway in the comments section, which I will never do. But say I will actually do a giveaway in the comments section, knowing that there are a lot of scammers who will try to pretend to be me in the comments section and will scam people out of money. Why would I use the same method that contains a lot of scammers or could be co-opted by scammers? Couldn't God come up with a method that is better than a guy said that God told me so?
Oh, absolutely. A true God won't use that method, but also we understand how this method gets really developed by humans quite easily. Imagine yourself going to buy a secondhand car, just to be told by the dealer, "Oh, this is the best secondhand car you'll find in California." And you shouldn't go elsewhere. You shouldn't see elsewhere. Elsewhere, all the cars have issues in them. And then you go to the other car dealers and say, "Oh, that guy, oh, he's just full of shit." And they'll tell you a story about him and his cars and stuff. And my cars are actually way better. It's a very old trick to sell you your product and make sure that you don't buy any other products. It's primitive way of trying to sort of sell you something by making sure that you understand that this product offered to you is the most superior, and any other on offer is just fake.
Mhm. If I were God, and I know I'm not, but if I were a fair God, I imagine that I would want to transmit my proof of existence or my message or whatever you want to call it in a way that is foolproof, that first of all cannot be reasonably denied by any honest person. Secondly, cannot be co-opted by dishonest people or even people who are mistaken in thinking that God spoke to them. Um, it would just be a method in a class of its own that is just beyond any sort of corruption or misunderstanding or miscommunication. But we see that it is the same method that people use for general communication and for false religions, so to speak. So it doesn't make any sense to use that method because if God knows that people will follow false prophets, and he thinks that his prophets are the true prophets and there are false prophets, then he's effectively dooming a lot of people to go to hell just because they fell for the same exact message, just with the title changed. Because as you know better than I, all the arguments that Christians and Muslims and other theists use for God are interchangeable. They all use the same arguments,
Hmm.
and it's the conclusion part where they differ, which is therefore Jesus, therefore Yahweh, therefore Allah. Uh, so if I were to follow the same method and believe that there is a God, I'm still likely to fall into one of the other false religions or incorrect choices. So why do this? It seems like God is set on putting as many people in hell as possible, including theists who are this close to getting it.
Oh, absolutely. Statistically, even the Pascal's wager. Pascal was a French mathematician who his equation in his own head, it's a 50-50 situation, not knowing about all the alleged gods. So statistically, the amount of false prophets way outweigh the one true one. So just by the sheer statistical variation, you're bound to be believing in the wrong one. And I completely agree with you. God has actually chosen one of the most inferior way to transmit His message, language. And when we talk always about the Quran, I'm a native Arabic speaker through my dad, and the Quran is problematic, and that's why you have the Quranists at the moment who would actually say, chop the hands off. That's actually not cutting. That's not the cutting that we know. Hit women, that's all not the hitting. It means to separate or to go away. And you get all these playing with words, and you would wonder, and rightly so, because words don't have intrinsic meanings. Words have utilities, and they advance in time and evolve in time. The word gay, 120 years ago, this is a morning greeting in the UK. Um, Now it's perceived to be something a little bit different. So why would God, why would an almighty, all-wise, all-knowing, knowing the future, understanding that the words will be conceived differently in the future, would transmit his words in language, yet gives his adversary, Lucifer, the best possible way to communicate with humans? And God should have kept that for himself. Direct download or upload, you choose your uh, your tech term here, and into the human mind. So I'll speak to AA in his dialect, in his 21st century lingo, terminologies, exactly knowing his psyche, knowing exactly the entry to his personality. So you might be scientifically minded. So the evidence I'll give you is something that of a scientific nature, or the other way around for somebody else who believes in metaphors and emotions and things like that. You give them the evidence necessary for their personality, direct download into their brains without the use of language, just like the Charles Xavier of X-Men.
Mhm.
Charles Xavier doesn't even need to say to something, be kun fayakun. He doesn't need to say that because he can actually do it with his mind. He's a bit quicker than releasing some sounds that have to have frequency through a medium. By the way, there is no sound in space
Mhm.
because there's no medium for sound to be transmitted into. So it's actually quite limited way of doing it. If you do it with thoughts, with ideas, and that idea is instantaneous with the action, it's actually a lot quicker than what would God have to say something for it to manifest. So Charles Xavier wins that one.
I've never really thought about that. The angels that are sitting in orbit somewhere, listening to God, akin to a satellite forwarding his messages to Earth. Um, they're listening. Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that they have wings that don't work in space and
Mhm.
audio that isn't transmitted in space, but they're listening for something that is not instantaneous. I hadn't thought about that side of things. I mean, I thought about the wings, but not the audio part. But I suppose it could be instantaneous still. But your point still stands that Shaitan can speak to every single one of us. The devil can speak to every single one of us in their language, but Allah has to speak to us through the Arabic Quran, which even Arabs disagree on and are still arguing each other about 1400 years later. Wouldn't it be so simple to have one or multiple even glowing entities, humanoids, whatever you want to call them, and they're just glowing. It's obvious that there's something supernatural about them, and they're, ghostly figures, whatever they may be, and they don't age, and they just exist in their temples for till the end of humanity. You have a question about God, you go ask them, and they'll answer you in your language. That would be so simple for God. He could create an app that does the same exact thing today. You can conceive of an app that I mean, they already exist, that gives you your tafsir in your language. But of course, there's still difference there. But Allah didn't do that. He just sent a guy a long time ago, or many, many guys a long time ago. Um, and I wonder why. What was the wisdom in limiting his transmission method to something so inefficient and so, like you said, most of the time used by false prophets, according to the narrative?
Yeah. And in such a small area, like we're talking about the Middle East, we're talking about the three Abrahamic religions within hundreds of kilometers from each other in close proximity in history. So God always, I mean, he didn't choose China, where writing has been invented, or the Egyptian civilization where morality has already advanced in leaps, right? He would choose to go back to always to a nomadic tribe. And I take no sort of, I'm not attacking nomadic people here. This is the nature of their existence. They travel around. It's not a civilization because they cannot settle. And therefore, their knowledge of life around them is not fully developed. And it couldn't be. So they're very, very simple people. And he continuously choosing these type of people to convey his message to humanity. And I talking especially about Islam. This is his last word to humanity, and he insists, even though his two other books. Obviously, if you're Christian, you don't believe that there's something called the Al-Injil. There isn't such a thing. It's actually, this word, by the way, isn't even Arabic. It's Greek. And Jesus would have not said that word. This is because the Old Testament, sorry, the New Testament was written in something called Koine Greek, not the Aramaic, the language of Jesus. So the word Angelius, which is Al Injil, is a Greek word, and therefore the Quran contains a word that wasn't uttered by Jesus and even God Himself at that time. The true word in Aramaic would have been Busharat, coming from the Arabic word Bushra, which
Mhm.
means the good news, and also known in the Bible as the good news. So it's as ridiculous, it's so blatantly obvious, in my opinion, that this is a human endeavor. However, and I might maybe spend 30 seconds in this one here. I hate when people, I mean, that's freedom, but I don't like it myself. When people burn the Bible or flush the Quran in the toilet. I can understand some people that have atrocities that happen to them, and that's how they vent their spleen. But to me, as somebody, I would actually, I'm treasuring these books, not because of the truth they contain, but because of the psychological background they reveal of humanities when they are fearful and ignorant. They ought to be studied. We cannot advance until we understand where we came from. So to me, these are very important books to reveal our psychology, our fears, our ignorances back in the day. So I dislike that. That's why I approach this with respect to the human endeavor that's been put in these books. But I understand that they're not true.
Mhm. I think even if you burn a copy or two, you're not gonna lose the actual text in this day and age. Like there's already many copies of it, but I get your point still. I think that I think it depends on the context whether or not I support desecrating such a book. Sometimes it's done in an act of protest, and sometimes there is a meaningful message behind the action. And sometimes it's just done to prove a point that the followers are emotionally volatile and will send you threats. And that in itself, some people think is proving a point and therefore worthy of doing. I think it depends. I haven't done it myself. I didn't see a point in doing it. There was a time back when I was on Twitter, people would really get under my skin on Twitter, which is why I left Twitter. Um, but I might have like done like given the finger to the Quran or something. I don't remember. That was like 3 years ago, and and then immediately I regretted it. Not because I felt bad that people will be mad, but I felt like that would just stop people listening to what I actually want to say. So I took it down, but I think people did keep sharing it for a while, trying to like show that Aladdin is a hateful person. I still stand by it. I think I don't revere religious books. I don't think that they're worthy of respect just because other people respect them or because they have to do with the topic of religion. I think they've caused a lot of harm and will continue to cause a lot of harm. But I also try to be strategic about how I voice my displeasure with these books. And there's a time and a place for how to demonstrate that.
No, I do agree. I think it's smarter way to approach things. If truly our aim is to change people's, obviously it's not going to happen overnight. We're talking about things that are ingrained in the human nature and ingrained in people's upbringing. So these things will take generations, almost like the same time it took the Dark Ages in Europe to sort of dissipate and for the Enlightenment to come up in Europe, and you end up in nowadays Europe where religion is still there. Faith is still there. You can do whatever you want. You can go to a church, a synagogue, a temple, a strip bar. Um, this is your freedom to practice as long as you're not breaking any laws and as long as you not legislate based on my God told me so.
Mhm.
That's it. That's what we're asking at the moment. We're most of the time I don't ask people to lose their faith, but don't tell me that a fetus is covered first by bone and then the flesh comes afterwards, because that's not scientifically accurate. I'm really sorry. It's just not accurate. I mean, these are one of the things that we're going to have to talk about at some point today, and that's what was the big evidence for me. How can the creator of the universe make such big mistakes about the universe in terms of cosmology, in terms of embryology, in terms of science? This could not be God.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess that's a good segue to how you feel about scientific miracle claims relating to Islam. Um,
Scientific miracle. It's an oxymoron to start with. A scientific miracle. A scientific thing is something that obeys the laws of physics, and a miracle is the suspensions of laws of physics. So therefore, they cannot. You might say um, 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 an indication of a scientific knowledge before its time. That I can understand, but a scientific miracle, they don't sort of work together.
mhm. If something is scientific, it's not a miracle. But like you said, the miraculous aspect of it is how basically it boils down to how could they have known this at the time?
That's the
That's
one.
what the miracle claim is.
Yeah, that's the one. And again, every single claim that's been alleged is incorrect. Um, Obviously, if when I go to the tafsir in the Quran, I go to the olden days, right? Al-Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir. Those are the people who understood the language in a very similar way to the around the times of the prophets, right? It's because we always said when you need to understand the text, you need to understand it in the same way it was understood and revealed at the time, because words change. So you cannot bring your understanding and say, hold on, quantum mechanics. I've got black holes in the Quran. I've got the Big Bang in the Quran. It's just not going to work like that. It's just
Mhm.
not, because Sam Harris has shown it in a chicken recipe. You can read a chicken recipe book and say, oh, the salt is the symbol of goodness. The black pepper is the evilness and the evil in human hearts. I can play that game all day long. it's just it's just no end to it. So you can't really do that. You gotta understand in the way it was understood and revealed and even explained at the time. So there is a very important hadith. It's called the proof of prophecy, where Jews came to Muhammad to make sure and verify whether he's a true prophet of God or not, and ask him three questions. And one of those questions was about what makes a male and a female. And then he talked about the water, obviously the semen, ma al rajul and ma al mar'a, the semen of the women of women, and one of them is if it's superior to the other, then it becomes a boy or becomes a girl. Obviously, God did not understand about eggs, didn't understand about the XY variation and marriage between the two sexes, and how the male actually sort of decides the sex, and the female has an X, and the male can bring an X or a Y. Didn't understand a word of that, and made the biggest blunder. I mean, if this guy was really speaking to God, he would have not made such a and the context is huge.
Mhm.
This is the context of proving that he is a prophet of God. It is scientifically and utterly inaccurate.
Yeah. There was another hadith, and I don't want to get into the specifics of it because it is a horrible hadith, but where basically the one of the ideas being conveyed were it doesn't matter whether you in the process of intercourse, doesn't matter where the man ejects, basically, whether it is inside or outside. Allah decides whether you're going to have a child or not, which is absolutely false. I mean, it's not guaranteed if you do it the right way, so to speak, that you will have children, but the chances are way more likely. If you don't do it that way, you're not going to have children. So the idea that just go reckless, and if Allah decided that you deserve that you're going to have a kid, then you're going to have a kid anyway. Or it's a silly idea. I don't think they understood science that well. Uh, eh,
No, because
yeah.
obviously with coitus interruptus, well, that's the scientific term for
Mm,
ejaculating outside, it's not 100% tight and proof, because you can
mhm.
obviously ejaculate a little bit the pre-cum or the cum just before, and you think you're safe, but you're not. So it does happen, and maybe this is because they've done it and the women became still pregnant, and who knows, maybe she had other people that she's seeing on the side, but they go, okay, well, that's not 100%, and therefore
Mhm.
maybe there is something at play here. Maybe God is doing something in the background, and because it's not a very effective way of making sure 100% that the woman will not conceive.
Yeah, it's there's so much inaccuracy in stuff that Muhammad said that I find it disingenuous, though I don't think that is the intention of the person pointing to scientific miracles, but it is disingenuous to ignore all of them and look at a verse that says, that we split the ground from the sky and say that that is the Big Bang. Like that is no, that's such a reach.
Well,
Um,
what
yeah,
what is sky? There is no such thing as sky. I mean, sky.
yeah.
What is sky?
There's so much that could be said about that, but One approach that I want to take, it's a video that I've been thinking about making for a long time, is talking about all the because the scientific miracle claim basically boils down to, like I said, how could they have known this at the time? I have so many examples. I asked a historian, a friend of mine, or a history geek friend of mine, so many examples of things that have nothing to do with Islam or the region from thousands of years, sometimes before Muhammad, of incredible scientific discovery and inventions and techniques that sometimes are lost through history and then found again. But the point is that people weren't just shepherds sitting around, playing with rocks. People actually had ideas back then. So it's not even that amazing. Like there's so many examples. Like one of them is the Antikythera mechanism. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. Let me show it on screen for a second. So this right here, it is it is the oldest known example of an analog computer used to predict astronomical where's that part that I was reading? Astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. So this thing is from before Christ. And they're surprised when they see some description of a human has however many bones, and it's not even an accurate description. People were inventing stuff thousands of years before Islam. So it's not really a miracle to me that there is something that could be vaguely scientifically advanced in Islam.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, AA, but we know that this area was surrounded by civilizations where things were truly advanced. I mean, look at the Egyptian civilization to the east, sorry, to the west. Um, the I think there is a temple in Luxor where the sunlight sort of shines over through a hole into the temple on the face of the king the day of his birth and the day he was throned to be a king. And it happens every year, regardless of the shifting. And so these are specific astronomical calculations that were made in advance. So these
Mm.
people, I mean, mummification. I mean, we have so much evidence, but as you said before, one of the criteria to verify a prophecy of a scientific nature, that somebody revealed something that was not known, is the thing that has been talked about was not known. So the embryology in the Quran is almost a copy paste from the incorrect understanding of the Greek of embryology, which is Galenos. Galen is the doctor, and there was a Chandran in India as well. So these we're talking about 1,000 years before Islam. These things were sort of known. How did they know? So, he was an illiterate. How would he know? We've been told that he's been working with Khadijah for at least 15 years. He married her at the age of 25. She was 40, and the revelation came when he was 14, Ghar Hira. So he had 15 years of trading, maybe going to Syria, going to Egypt, going to Jordan, these modern areas, and talking to traders and listening to stories and stuff like that. Who doesn't? I mean, we don't even know if this is his own effort. It could be a collaboration
Mm.
of people, and that's why you get very different tones in the Quran. That's why the Quran before the migration has more of a Sufi, spiritualistic, nice, not compulsion and religion and stuff like that. And then suddenly, the verses used to be very short and very kind of sweet. Now we're talking about long, and a lot of them are issuing stern warning to people of of horrible torture, and obviously the killing verses of, if you disbelieve, this is what we are going to do to you. So you almost could say the collaboration, you can see there are different styles and different techniques can be attributed to different people.
Yeah, I struggle to say with confidence whether that is true or not. Obviously, I don't think you're claiming that that is a fact, but it is a speculation that could be the
Probably, yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Um, I I think that it's important not to work with the assumptions that we're given. So one assumption that we're always given that is said as an assertion, not an assumption, is that he did exist, he was illiterate, he was honest, he's the most honest guy in all of the land, and whatnot. So then when you start from that point, then you get cornered into these questions that are non sequiturs. Like, how could one illiterate guy write all of this? Well, wait a second. I never agreed that it is one illiterate guy. So we have to remember to start from the actual beginning. Like, I can entertain some of these assertions to a degree, and then to start from a point of agreement. But sometimes it's important to remind the people that we don't know how much of what we know about Muhammad is actually true, because as far as we know, people could have written all these legends about him, just like they have about every other character throughout history, and most of them are not actually true. Um, but even if even if we say that this guy was illiterate, as in he couldn't read or write, like you give him a pen, he doesn't know what to do with it. Despite there being a hadith where he said, give me a
Yeah,
pen and I'll write you a book. But whatever, that could be interpreted as get me a scribe with a pen, maybe, if we're
and I
being
will
charitable.
dictate. Yeah,
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 sure.
agree.
But even if he couldn't read or write, again, he wasn't just sitting playing with sheep and rocks. Like, he can still speak, he can understand, he can repeat things. And that was during a time where most people couldn't read and write in that region. So it's
Yes.
not like he was some rare exception made to prove the point that he is not making this stuff up. Um, Actually, it's a non sequitur to say that he can't read or write, therefore he must be telling the truth. No, he can. Someone who can't read or write can still lie, or I'm not calling him necessarily a liar, but he can still say things that aren't true.
Do you know,
Uh,
AA,
mm,
that even if you're honest, because again, this is
mm,
another problem. Being honest doesn't translate to correct information. You could be honest and under misapprehension.
yeah.
That it's very simple. I mean, it's not enough for you to. You also need to be correct. You need to be factually correct, and you might not be lying. What if you're delusional? What if you are going through psychosis, where people actually believe that the rings in their ears and the visions they see are true? He's honest about that. People
Mhm.
with possessions, they think they are possessed, and they're honest about it. They're not lying about it, but they're
Mm,
not.
yeah. This reminds me of the accusation that if you and I don't believe in Muhammad's message and we scrutinize a lot of what he said or is presumed to have said, then we must hate him. Or even like from atheists, some of them would want us to say, I think he was the most evil man to ever exist, or I think he was a deceptive, cunning uh, personality. Like you said, that's not necessarily the only conclusion that there is out there. He could have actually been convinced of everything that he said, or he could have just said some of these things and the rest of it was added on. We don't know, but the point that is important here is, was he a prophet? Or even bigger than that, bigger picture than that, what is a true prophet? Not just asking, is Muhammad a true prophet or a false prophet? Is there such a thing as a true prophet? How do you determine that on its own, instead of just looking at Muhammad? Because I find that that is something that, again, not intentionally misleading, but that's something that a lot of believers are misled by. They look at the criteria that their specific religion excels in, or the criteria that they think makes their religion seem true or seem good, and then they focus on that. But if we look at it in a vacuum, what does, for example, the preservation of a text, what does it say about its truthfulness? Nothing. The honesty of a man, what does that say about his next words? Not really much. Like that, it can give you an inclination that he's an honest person, but it doesn't mean that it is proof that what he says is truth. So whenever a Muslim is trying to assess, and if you're watching this, if you're trying to assess the divinity of the Quran, or Allah's words, or the truthfulness of Muhammad's prophethood, apply this criteria to a different scenario that has nothing to do with Islam or Muhammad, and see if it actually makes sense to you.
I mean, there are so many issues. I mean, even the Quran. It's been alleged that the Quran has been preserved, and not just preserved. It was written in a Lawh al-Mahfuz, in that preserved tablet,
Mhm.
before all humanities were created. So that poor dude Abu Lahab was condemned. This guy didn't have a free will. Like he must do that because otherwise the prophecy would have never been fulfilled. It's a different issue. But that Quran that was preserved, written and preserved in the preserved tablets with God since eternity, before humanity. Do the Muslims know that there are multiple recitation and readings of the Quran where the words utterly differ? Not just words, but the meaning of words and the the law that will be conceived from these utterings. For example, you have two most famous readings of the Quran. One in North Africa, I think it's Qira'at Hafs, and there's Warsh in the Saudi Arabia near Egypt area. And we're talking about, for example, the angels are with God, Al-Malaika عند الرحمن, or Ibad al-Rahman. Obviously, these are problems because of the dots and the punctuations. It was before that, which is again poses another question. We talked about God choosing the most inferior way to transmit a message through language, but also chooses an immature language that it was still being developed, which will eventually lead to people reading the Quran differently, al-masakin or al-miskin. So this is an actual thing that you would end up doing that might get you to go to hell or heaven. Do you feed one poor person because it's singular, or masakin, which is plural, which is three and above? It's incredible. I mean, and they're still claim that the Quran has never been changed, and it's just the one. There's at least about 100, 150 differences between the Quran read or used in North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and the one that is used in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or Jordan, for example.
I can think of one good way to ensure, and this is a tip for the next Allah, I suppose, for the next revelation, to ensure that it is unchanged whatsoever before technology. You could just have a checksum value for people in the tech world. It's like they would understand. This is basically if every letter has a value, and then you have a calculation that gives you a single number at the end of each line using all the letters. You have to then you can check. You can use that calculation versus the letters, do the math yourself, and see if it matches the number that's at the end of the line. That's it's a very integral part to how electronic communication works. This is something that you don't need computers for. Yes, it'll take some time to actually do the math on your hand, but for the scribes that are copying, all they need to do is copy the last number. That's it. It's just one extra number per line or even per page. That's just one way to verify that if you do all the math correctly, if you copied everything correctly and you do the formula correctly, you will get this number. And that's how you know that nobody has touched this page since it was revealed. But God didn't even do that.
Well,
Yeah.
we know AA there were issues from day one. From day one, we're talking about, okay, first of all, the prophet of God. How can the prophet of God, over 23 years of revelation, not starting the initiative of collecting the Quran in a book? Because it was never collected. It was preserved in the chests of those who memorized the Quran. You and I know what human memory is like. It's horrible. It's horrible. Eyewitnesses, they've done that sort of experiment on 9/11. They got people who've actually been there, verified to been there, gone through the horrid experience of 9/11, got them to give their testimony. A year later was different. 3 years later was again different. They were not lying, but that's what that's what the human brain does, the indexing and filling the gaps, and especially if the situation was traumatic, an exaggeration later on of your own story without you realizing it. So, and then Uthman, we have evidence that he was burning Quran versions. Why was he burning them? If they were really truly preserved, that means he come across some versions of the Quran where were not supposed to be accurate. Also, why were they asking for two witnesses with each verse to come and to come forth and verify that this verse was accurate? And then we have hadith by Aisha later on to say, oh, the stoning verse was in the Quran, but a sort of a farm animal, whether it's a goat or a chicken, came and ate the Quran. That's just an incredible stuff, for the lost word of God. It just is incredible.
Yeah. Mind you, most Muslims don't know about these things, and the only time they're hearing about them is from people like us, and we are immediately not deemed trustworthy from the get-go, because it is presumed that we have um, an agenda to taint the image or the truthfulness of Islam with falsehood, and to make up things or to focus on the wrong things. The problem that the problem that Islam set up for itself is the claim of perfection. If you find one single flaw in perfection, it's no longer perfect, and that means that I can scrutinize the silliest, most inconsequential thing about the Quran, and as long as I have some merit to my criticism, which is not what I try to do, but I'm just saying, if I could scrutinize anything, and as long as I have a point, then yeah, it is not perfect. It doesn't have to be about the most focal point about Allah's existence or anything like that. If I can scrutinize one verse in the Quran that is claimed to be perfect, and I show that it could be written better, and I've done that so many times that
Hmm.
it would clear so many misconceptions, so-called misconceptions, and it would make it so sometimes even more elegant to just change one thing and make it better. Um, then it is
Well,
not perfect.
it's happened in the past. Omar ibn al-Khattab had to intervene and come up with awl, which will correct the issue with the mathematics of God
Mhm.
in inheritance, because you don't get to the 100%. If God did shares, this would have never been a problem. But the way He's done it with percentages is cause issues with the different variation of relationships. So it took a mere human, and Umar ibn Khattab has a huge influence. The hijab verse about the wives of the Prophet is because of the dismay of Umar ibn Khattab, and this guy has changed a lot. He's actually done a lot in the Quran. He's very influential. But every single thing you and I would be saying today, it's not hidden. You People can actually go and verify this information for themselves. It's not like like, sorry, this is a secret information that is sent to me through dreams. It's in the books.
Yeah. It's for reference, by the way, I put it in the live chat. It's Surah An-Nisa, verses 11 and 12, the inheritance problem. And look it up. Again, we're not making this up. It's not a secret. It's not Allah told me so in a dream or in a cave. It's the words that people claim are Allah's words. So yeah. So I have a question for you, because even though your focus is not primarily religion, I imagine that sometimes when you talk about religion, people perceive you to be all the things that are ascribed to a religious critic specifically, or an apostate, or an atheist. So, have you received any sort of, to any degree, any sort of hateful comments for what you do, or accusations for your motivations behind what you do?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But not because I'm pretty like most 80% of my channel is dedicated to the removal of ignorance
Mm.
from people's minds. So I talk a lot more about science. Tonight, like in a few hours, I have a Muslim professor from the United Arab Emirates who teaches cosmology. So we're going to talk about quantum mechanics, and we're going to talk about other things. So I want to show, so I'm collaborating with a Muslim. He knows I'm an atheist. He's open-minded enough.
Mhm.
His version of Islam, mind you, is a bit different. But this is a wonderful world that I want to live in. This guy is not going to say that the stars are made to shoot jinns in the sky because they're trying to eavesdrop on God's plans. He's never going to say that. He's going to say this is a metaphor.
Mhm.
This is a metaphor, and it's supposed to be something symbolic for humans to understand, and understand in a symbolic way. And he will go with the physics, and I'm okay with that kind of world for now. You know, so I spend a lot of
Were you
time
always
on.
okay with that kind of rationalization, by the way? Or in the
Uh,
beginning, were you frustrated by meeting that
no,
kind of believer?
from practicality's sake, I've always known that getting rid of faith altogether in a humanity that evolved to use faith is going to be a difficult task. It's not going to happen overnight. This is ingrained, and I still do it. We do it without realizing. Like, I do it sometimes, and then go, I have to pinch myself, say, "Oh, stop it!" The amount of biases that in us as humans that actually help us survive are incredible, and they're needed. Imagine your bias towards your mother. If you don't have that, you can't really have that relationship where she cares for you and you care for her. You think she's the most beautiful, most intelligent woman, and you love her for it's very subjective. It's not probably uh, ontologically accurate, but it's enough for you to survive. So the amount of bias, your bias towards your country, the bias towards, that love, that natural love, you don't know where it comes from, but you just feel that affinity with something because you're born with, and you got that bias, and that bias will help you get protected by the group that you belong to, and it's very helpful. So I understand this is not going to go away soon. All what I'm trying to do is being logical and practical about it. I'm trying to take away the harmful elements from it. The no stoning, no lashing, no cutting hands of the hand, cutting the hands, stuff like that. That I'm okay with. But if somebody says, well, if I pray, when I pray al-dhuhr, and I feel so cleansed and so clean, and I feel so peaceful, and I want to do good, nice things, and I want to go and feed my cat and look after the dog on the street, I'm gonna say, well done. It's great energy. Keep it up, mate. Not a problem.
Um, I used to at first it used to frustrate me because our journey is different. I stayed in Islam for a long time because I was more born into it, and when I first left, I was very frustrated with believers who weren't taking things literally. And I recognize that now, especially when I had time to pause and think about it. What do I want them to believe? Do I want them to take it literally and then apply it? No, of course I don't want that. What I wanted at the time was for them to see how ridiculous it sounds when it is taken literally, because for most of history, it was interpreted that way. And I was frustrated that how don't you see that this stuff is ludicrous? But now I realize that I can't force them to take it literally, then shoot down how ridiculous it seems when it is taken literally. Uh, their existence as you want to call them progressive believers, you want to call them selective believers, whatever they want to call themselves, either their existence is good because it dilutes the amount of hard harmful belief that exists among that group. So even if they're not technically non-Muslims anymore, or some Muslims might call them non-Muslims, but in their own eyes they still count as a Muslim, that's fine as long as they're not causing harm to themselves or anyone else, even if their rationalizations don't make sense to me or wouldn't have kept me religious back when I was looking for those rationalizations. But now I'm fine with it as long as they don't get in the way of criticism of religion. And it doesn't sound like someone like the person that you're going to talk to. It doesn't sound like he's getting in the way of your criticism
Yeah.
of religion. So, yeah.
Yeah. The very funny thing, AA is actually in the last couple of years. I've only started about 3.5 years ago. I spent the first probably 18 months sort of focusing on faith, but I'm actually working more now on atheists, those who left religion, because this is another issue. You can have people leaving religion and almost flip 180 degrees to be the other side of the coin, of the same coin. Have biases. So, for example, when people I go on TikTok and I go on Clubhouse, and people open rooms, atheists, and say, the Prophet of Islam was a pedophile. And I disagree with that. I disagree not because I'm kind or I don't want to hurt people, because literally he does not qualify under that there's a DSM-5 where it qualifies psychological disturbances and what's an ailment in terms of psychological. issues, and there was DSM-4. It was upgraded to DSM-5 for homosexuality. By the way, it used to be a psychological ailment in DSM-3, I think, and it got sort of watered down about in 4, and 5 is out altogether, because it has to be a persistent thing throughout the life, and it has to be a hindering. You cannot presume life as per normal if you don't have it, right? So he does not qualify. He is not that, but he's actually worse. My allegation is actually way worse. It's to do with his God, because if his God was a true God, he would have stopped. If this was an old habit when humanity was ignorant, what is God doing here when he agrees that old horrible habit and agrees to keep slavery? Because humanity is so much used to it. What is he doing? What is God's lost revelation doing if he's coming just to emphasize what we've already been practiced? And that yet he's so adamant and he's so black and white about a sandwich of bacon. That requires a direct tahrim.
Yeah.
You know? It's incredible. So I work a lot on an atheist at the moment, atheism. So you have the situation in the Middle East at the moment, right? And so a lot of people think, oh, you're atheist now, so you're supposed to hate and detest everything Arabs and that culture stand for, even if they're truly been victimized by another nation who suffered in history for quite some time, just to repeat the cycle. So it's almost like the kid who's been beaten up by his own dad, and instead of breaking the cycle and not doing to his own son, he beats his own son. And you know what I'm talking about. So they go, okay, I'm gonna side by the other guys because they are the friends of the enemies of my friend. I'm sorry. So I'm going to I'm spending time on atheists at the moment to ensure that they have access to the different schools of ethics outside of the divine command theory. So consequentialism, utilitarianism, things like that, to adopt a moral stance and to understand the science. And you cannot just say anything because it suits your agenda being an atheist now. So I make sure that most of my arguments sometimes are with atheists at the moment, not with religious people, because you cannot leave one issue just to repeat it, but in a different way, different context.
Agreed. I it's funny that you put it that way. I haven't put as much of a emphasis on I will speak to atheists now, but I find myself sort of doing it already, which is focusing on ex-Muslims. I'm trying to talk to both Muslims and ex-Muslims in my videos, with a bigger emphasis on ex-Muslims sometimes. But I'm trying to show them not just, hey, Islam sucks, believers are dumb. Let's all just gloat about how much better we are. I don't think I think that your journey starts now. It doesn't end now. Just because you left religion doesn't mean that you're done with all the thinking. Now you have to start to tackle a lot of big questions. I mean, it's easy to say that anything Islam approves of is bad. That's not necessarily true. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. There are a lot of
Great.
things in Islam that they're fine, good, neutral, all sorts of, the spectrum. So, like you said, the association of anything that is anti this group or this ideology is amazing. That is not true. And there are a lot of ethical and moral conundrums that you will now face, and you have no tools. Like in the past, you had a tool set that was very simple to use, more or less. You ask a sheikh, you look it up, you don't do the thinking. It's just, is this haram, is it not haram? Now you have to figure out for yourself, to what degree is this bad, why is it bad, is it good, and so on. You're focusing more on talking about the philosophical side of it. I'm trying to approach the humanitarian side of it. And in understanding how a believer believes, hopefully that'll soften some of the ex-believers and humble them a little bit and make them realize that you're not that much better than a believer just because you no longer believe in that one religion. There's so much more that you need to take this approach in life, this critical thinking. You need to apply it to everything in life, or most things in life. It's exhausting to think about everything critically, of course, but to a lot of things in life, and not just be proud of yourself for having left a religion.
Absolutely true. The other thing is the vacuum. Is the vacuum, and people can lie to themselves and say, oh, I feel better. And no, most people, when they leave that sort of um, security thing, the dead in the sky, that makes it all comfortable, makes everything make sense, and there is a reason for our existence, and all these brilliant ideas are flowing right now. Are they actually doomed to sort of die off, and that's it, and there is no point of it all, you know? Or or we can anchor our existence on something new that gives rise to its meaning from within intrinsically, without having to 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 come from outside. So morality, for example, believers believe if there is no neutral, great arbiter, then who is going to decide what's good and what's right, right? So here comes the divine command theory, where actually even God himself is a relativist. So killing is bad. Oh, but only if you do it to those who would oppose you. All right. Um, uh, um, Adultery is bad, but then right hand possess is fine, right?
Mhm.
So you'll find that God himself is a relativist. There is nothing, because morality can never be absolute. Can never, because it's always contextual. You tell me about the instance, and I'll tell you whether this was moral or not. There is never one way to say this is immoral, full stop. So if I can tell you, ending the life of a child, of a baby, like a 2 weeks old, is that a horrible thing? Oh, it's disgusting. Nobody should. If I tell you that this baby is terminal and he's absolutely suffering and he's screaming nonstop,
Mhm.
then it's suddenly the context is completely different. And even you might still disagree, but you're gonna have to pause and you go, okay, this is problematic. So
Or
it's
from God's
always been
point
like,
of view, if the baby was going to turn out to be a disbeliever or
yeah.
something.
The story, the
Yeah,
Al
yeah,
Qadr, yeah, that's
yeah.
incredible, great, and he intervenes here. Like, so
Mhm.
this is another confusing aspect about God. So he intervenes here. So obviously, okay, great, God intervenes when there's a injustice about to happen. What happened to baby Hitler? Why was he left alone?
Yeah. I want to read a few super chats, by the way, before I
Sure.
forget. Uh, First of all, thank you, because Jesus Bible. I've never had someone with such a name give me a super chat before. Thanks, and thank you for gifting a bunch of memberships. That's very kind of you. Stop scamming, man. Also, thank you for the super chat. They're saying Muslim apologists warn each other that that only a small portion of those preached to convert and stay Muslim. Were the rejectors damned anyway, or is dawah causing more to damnation? What a false economy. I made a short video about that in the past. What do you think about this? That dawah is causing more people to go to hell?
Oh, it's debatable. From their point of view, they're thinking they're doing the right thing. This is a bigger problem in the human endeavor. There's always, um, it's relativistic from the point of view where you're looking at it. From the da'i point of view, the guy who's actually given, heed to the message, and trying to progress the message, he's doing the right thing. And what else can you do other than claim that this is the true word of God, and so forth, not knowing the issues. But what it does is actually, I'm the neutral one. I like every idea on earth to be exposed. Exposed as in, not as an exposed to be a lie, but exposed to the light, so it can be scrutinized.
Mm.
And then if it's strong enough, it stays on its own feet. Just exactly like a scientific
Mhm.
hypothesis. For it to become a theory later on, and to be saying, well, this actually explains the physical truth, it had to stand to scrutiny and falsifiability. If you it needs to be tested, it needs to be tested, it needs to be verified, and after huge amount of effort, you go, okay, well, this is our best model for the understanding of gravity, as we speak. uh, but some so that's why ideas, and I think the great Christopher Hitchens said once before, he said the word God is mentioned in the American Constitution for it to be contained. Because if you make it a secret thing, people love secrets and secret society. So you bring it up to scrutiny and to the attention of everybody so it can be contained.
Mhm. I want you to play devil's advocate for a second though, because I think I would argue, like you are thinking as an apologist, I suppose. I would argue that even as an apologist, you are damning more people to hell by making the message known. Because think about it, if there's a group of 100, say, Americans, let's just call them Americans, non-Muslims, who don't know about Islam, at least they don't know the true message, they just heard about Islam, which doesn't count, and you give da'wah to those 100 people, and 5 of them convert. Say you're very successful and actually 5 convert, which is, I would assume, is a very high rate. And then 4 of them end up leaving. So only 1 converts out of the 100. So now you've doomed 95 people to be rejectors of the message, and 4 of them to be extra super rejectors because they converted and then they left the religion. So 99 people are now going to hell, and those 100 people otherwise did not hear of the true message of Islam had you not done da'wah. You see what I mean?
But
So
but
they,
but, but that's completely fine, AA, because remember, this guy's fulfilling God's will and wish. Remember, God said that he could make everybody believe if he wanted to, but he vowed to fill hell with jinn and humans. Remember this verse?
so you're helping Allah fill hell with jinn
Fulfill
and
his,
human.
yeah.
I suppose, but if I were a kind-hearted da'wah person,
Oh,
I mean, I would want them to take. I don't know what the actual official position is. It's not clear. Those 100 people, had they never heard of Islam, there's a narrative that they will get tested in the afterlife. I don't know what that test is, whether they would have believed if they did receive the message, which is kind of a meaningless test, or that they will be judged by their actions. If they get judged by their actions, then I guarantee that most of them do not deserve to go to eternal hell. And that would be a better criteria than do you believe in Islam or not. But if they get judged in the afterlife, by whether or not they would have received the message, then it doesn't matter anyway. They're going to hell. The 99 are going to hell anyway. So I guess it depends on which methodology Allah follows.
I mean, hell alone, the philosophy of hell needs a separate episode.
Mhm.
I mean, this thing makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Eternal damnation. You create species out of nothing. You and I didn't choose to be here. We have no choice, but we're here. We're experiencing this life. So you imagine you creating a creature from scratch with consciousness and experience, just for them to go through a test that is modeled with puzzles. And if they fail somehow, you don't just returning them back to nothingness like the old Egyptian religion is actually it actually makes more sense. You know, that papyrus where there's that beast and the scale and there's a heart and a feather, and your heart needs to be lighter than the feather. If not, the heart has been eaten by that beast and you vanish. You're gone. Makes more sense. You know, you're not worthy of eternal life, but to be burned forever. And when I say forever, it's not 1 million years. It's not the age of the universe, the age of the earth of 4.5 billion years. It's not the age of the universe of 13.8 billion years. When it's not 94 billion years, which is the diameter of the observable universe. It's 94 billion years. You're only starting.
Mm-hmm.
This is incredible. I mean, I just and then calls himself Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and this is the vast majority of human population. So God creates. He knows the future. He creates a future self where he is on a throne of the vast majority of humanity, which is about 110 billion people so far, and counting. In a reality where the screams and the aching and the cries of all these humans are the order of the day.
Yeah.
What kind of future would you choose if you're a creator? Why would you choose this future for yourself? Because that's going to be eternal.
Allah
I don't understand
Spotify
that.
Wrapped is just people screaming in hell. That's his entire playlist all the time. All he's listening to is people screaming in hell. No matter how loud the laughter is in heaven, it cannot be louder than the screams in hell.
Mate, if I hear a whimpering dog, just like from next door neighbor, or a child in stress, I'm very stressed. I'm absolutely stressed. It's like I want to go and help that dog. I want to give it food. I want to comfort it. I get very stressed when I hear other
mm,
like people in pain. So that's for 5 minutes. Imagine forever.
yeah, now that I think about it, as a Muslim, I used to think, what's the point in having, there are all these hadiths about if you do this thing, you get a bigger house in Jannah, you get a better house in Jannah, or you get one more house in Jannah. And I always thought, what's the point? If you already have a house in Jannah, you're doing well. Like, that's great. But now that I think about it, maybe the subpar real estate is the one that is right next to the fence, between heaven and hell. So if you want to be away from the screaming, you got to pray more so that you're put in a better spot or higher enough away from the noise. Maybe that's it. Maybe if I had been a Muslim, I would have been in the lowest level of heaven, the one that is right next to hell, and I'd just be tormented the entire time. So that would be
Yeah.
hell for me.
And,
Like you said,
and there'll
I
be
can't.
those who be fighting on water view. Like I want my golden palace in heaven to be water view. I want Al Kawthar. Be right in front of Al Kawthar.
Yeah,
It's incredible. We're talking about real estates.
yeah. Like as if I couldn't tell, my personal assistant in heaven, I want a river right here. It doesn't have to be Al Kauthar specifically, but um, to follow up on that, Kitaro says, for them, those Dawa people we were discussing, the hypothetical Dawa person, the people who don't agree after receiving the truth about the perfect religion deserve to go to hell anyway. They think their arguments are 100% valid. Um, to that, I think, I mean, yeah, I get where you're coming from, commenter, but I invite such a person who believes that to think for a second. Again, in this hypothetical, if you invite 100 people to Islam with the correct message and so on, and a percentage of them will stay in Islam, if any, what does that say? Are 100 Americans inherently more terrible of people or more worthy of hell than 100 Jordanians, for example? Because if you sample 100 Jordanians, not all of them are going to heaven, according to Allah, He's going to judge, but a bigger portion of them are going to die a Muslim and are going to have a shot at heaven and a shot at avoiding eternal hell. So, unless that Dawah person believes that God created bad people and put them outside of the Muslim countries, there's something statistically off about this model.
But what about the not very altruistic motives? The commission that the Dawa guy gets paid by converting sales.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've always kind of ignored this when people mentioned Islam's similarities to Christianity. I said, but at least there's no financial incentive in Islam. Like you're not, yeah, there are donations at mosques and stuff, but it's not the same systemic sort of give me money as some churches can be. But I've neglected to think about there is that aspect of non-altruistic thinking of I want the good deeds. It's like an MLM scheme, like a
Yeah.
pyramid scheme. The people at the top, if you make someone do a good deed, or if you bring them to Islam, you get their good deeds as well, or you get
Mhm.
some bonus for that, if not their entire, coffers of good deeds. So even if the points aren't real, even if the money isn't real, someone's motivation being partly that makes their actions even more dubious.
Yeah, but that doesn't there isn't a problem in that, at least in Islam, that God is not going to look into the real motives as long as you convert. If you help converting, um, I guess it's good for Islam and good for that particular individual because you don't know, he's maybe making some sins and he'd like them to be wiped up and offset by these nice good deeds coming in. So it's a good investment, to work in. And plus, and I mean, we talked about the divine commission, but I think it's lucrative business now. I mean, look at some of the sheikhs, some 20 years ago used to say TV's haram. Now they are photographed with their YouTube shield, the background with a smile from one ear to the other.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. It is a very lucrative business, unfortunately, and I'm sure a lot of people go into it for other reasons, but the accusation is usually that the critics are in it for the money, when the real money is to be made in religion, not criticizing religion. Um, yeah, what we get is peanuts compared to, having a contract from an organization or a TV channel, and it's mind blowing the amount of money. I've seen some of their fees, like they have speakers fees to show up at an event,
Oh yeah,
somewhere from 10,000 US dollars to 50 or some number like that. It's insane. I can't imagine asking for $10,000 to do an hour of anything, let alone just talk about the same topic that I always talk about. So yeah, it's
yeah.
money's
Especially
definitely
to
a
get us
factor.
celebrity speakers for sure there. And you think this is the sort of thing that you do for absolutely for free, but people,
I mean,
but
even if not for free, just cover my ticket or something, like,
exactly, yeah, to
yeah,
cover expenses, yeah.
yeah. But yeah.
But but
Speaking
but
of
there's
yeah.
one thing for sure: we are in a very curious era. People are people want to know more about
Mhm.
things, and I'm hoping that they're listening to both sides as we speak. I'm sorry I cut you. I know you were going to show
I was
a
gonna make a
comment.
joke about, speaking about the big bucks and all the money. Thank you for the super chat, Kick No, reminding people to like and subscribe. That's very kind. But yeah, to your point, it is a curious time, and thankfully we don't need to have the financial backing of an entire network or an
Mm,
organization to turn on the camera and talk like we do. Obviously, it puts barriers when it's not as financially lucrative, but we have the right and the ability to speak, and we encourage everyone to participate in discourse like this. It doesn't just have to be YouTubers.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's any topic that we haven't touched on that we wanted to touch on during this stream.
You've mentioned there's something that you were preparing that you want to touch on at the very end, if we have time. You said.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this is a little teaser for those of you who do watch the live streams. Thank you for being here. Um, Recently, I went to a mosque, and I don't want to give away exactly how it went. I think I might even be a bit clickbaity in the video title when I do make it, because that's how YouTube works. But it was interesting. I went there with no expectations except that it will probably be interesting, and it was interesting. And yeah, I'm curious, Hani, when was the last time that you've been to a mosque, or have you ever been?
Oh, no, I practiced Islam for about 18 months or 2 years,
Mhm.
where I prayed every day and, went through the whole experience just to see what the fuss is all about.
Including
um,
like prayer at the mosque and everything,
yeah, went
Jama'ah.
through the
Yeah.
whole thing, read the Quran and got into it, but then, I realized wasn't true. I've done the same with Christianity and so I've been an atheist ever since. Maybe I was sort of a deist between the age of 18 to 21, after leaving Christianity and Islam. You go through that deism bit where it's like, what if there's something out there? Then I got really into science, evolution, and what have you. And then, currently I'm a negative atheist. So I'm not I don't say there is no God. I say the evidence provided are not convincing at the moment. But I happy to look at any evidence put in front of me in the future. Um, so the last time I was in a mosque, probably because I've probably done something very similar, and I'm very inquisitive about going to churches. And so I still like these places, by the way. I don't loathe them. I love, like when I was in Spain, some of the mosques are beautiful, gorgeous. So I love that human aspects again. So we talked about the literature in the holy texts. I also look at the architecture. I think humanity needs a bit of a strong motivation, and religion has been a very, very good one for at least for arts. If you look at the Sistine Chapel, gorgeous Raphael paintings and stuff like that, and Islam has provided art, beautiful art. So I don't have a problem at all. I don't have a problem at all. I can think the last time I was in a mosque in Melbourne, that would have been about 7 or 8 years ago. And I didn't go there to pray. I pretended to pray, but I just was absorbing the atmosphere and the energy just to see what people were. And it was different. It was different than back home. It was sporadic. It wasn't, the mosque wasn't full. People just prayed very quickly and left. It's almost like as if they were mechanically going through the motions to sign in the book that they've attended for the day and left, And I felt, okay, well, it wasn't spiritual as I remember it to be in Egypt. In Egypt was, you're surrounded by the azan and the people are next to you, and it was, I don't know, it was a different feel. And maybe I've aged a bit and I became sympathized from the spirituality realm. I don't know.
It could be also to play uh, Muslim mosque attendance advocate here. It could be that they're not in a Muslim country. There isn't as much understanding for the idea of, I'm going to go pray. I'm going to take time away from my day to pray. So they have to rush it because, they have work to get back to, or
Yeah.
secular activities where people aren't as okay with them taking 35 minutes, to go pray
Mm.
one prayer. So maybe that's it, but also maybe yeah, also during Ramadan, it's a whole different vibe, which is why I
Yeah.
wanted to go
Yeah.
during Ramadan as well.
Taraweeh, and yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I did. I wanted to go during Ramadan to get that vibe, but I didn't pay much attention to the other people there, so I don't know how spiritual they're being. I was trying to see how I would feel when I was there. And did you ever feel anything back when you did go to a mosque as a practicing Muslim? Did you feel something
Oh, at the time, of
supernatural?
course, yeah, you do. But we know where this comes from. It comes from even the same feeling you get from a Metallica concert, or going to Anfield and watch Liverpool and watch Mo Salah score a hat trick against Man City. So it's the same. So you're surrounded by people, and that group of people believe in the same thing and chanting the same thing with you. That feeling of elation is almost consistent. You can actually do an fMRI on the brain. You can see the exact areas lit in the brain while you're going through a spiritual, religious experience. It's the same as when you're going through music or arts, or your favorite sporting team. It's all there. Um, Mind you, Ramadan. I mean, and I wish I like Ramadan to survive. I like Ramadan to survive like Easter and Christmas, and because Ramadan in Egypt is quite beautiful. It's very nice. People play football until 4 o'clock in the morning. The shops are open, coffee shops. It's very festive, sort of atmospheres. TV shows, you name it. So once we get rid of the crazy elements, which we've done so many times before in the past, we can still keep the human bit of us enjoying each other's companies, and have some food and connect. I don't think this should go away.
So
And I
you're
think, and you
suggesting
can,
that Ramadan would be like one long Christmas, basically. The
yeah,
way
why
that, yeah,
not?
yeah.
Yeah, why not approach it that way? And because Christmas, I mean, the Christmas tree, what is that to do with Jesus? Easter bunny. Right now we're in Easter in Australia. People are going buying chocolate and Easter bunnies and eggs. This is nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, one can hope. I I know that in the audience there might be people right now who are going through Ramadan in a very different way that we're describing, because we get to, say as independent outsiders, yeah, I like the vibes and I enjoy participating on my own terms. But a lot of people, unfortunately, they don't get to choose. They're forced to participate, and I'm trying to assure them that we're not dismissing your experience. We're not saying that despite all the hardship you're going through, Ramadan is beautiful. We're saying it could be enjoyable if it wasn't forced on people, and if it was a bit less about the God aspect of it, I suppose. If it was just about the fun side of it.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I don't. As a matter of fact, it's probably a good thing. There is a very good movie that I'll, if you haven't watched already, have a watch. It's called um, it's by Christian Bale. I'm trying to remember. It was the same year as The Matrix. Equilibrium. Uh,
Okay.
uh, this is a couple of movies I'm going to recommend to you and your audience. Equilibrium. It's an imagined world where people realize emotions and any feelings of any sort, being religious or artistic or any, needs to be removed from humanity because this is the source of evil. So this is a new reality where you cannot own a painting, listen to music, even have a puppy. And Christian Bale was with an officer of the government that would enforce that sort of thing. But he had an epiphany, like where he was doing a raid on a house that allegedly had some paintings, and he heard a sound in a trunk, and it was a puppy, and he had the gun out to shoot it because that's what you're supposed to do by that police. And then he broke down in tears and took the puppy back home. You got to watch this. So
Mm.
the movie's just trying to tell you we don't want to end up being too dry, so now we're atheists. Now everything is clinical. Now everything is void of meaning and dry. Where I don't want to live in that world. I want to still live in a world where I go to a movie and I'm not invoking general relativity or the Fibonacci sequence. I want to go and just live the moment and let my emotions roll as a human, and then go back and in context use critical thinking when it matters in the right areas. But areas like love and connection, giving somebody a hug and making sure everybody's okay, that needs to stay intact. And you don't need supernatural realm or elements for this to exist.
Mhm. I hope we live to see that day where Ramadan would be like another Christmas or Easter or something that, I mean, maybe it already is for some people, but I hope to see it become that way for anyone who wants to opt in to Ramadan being that way. So, yeah. In the meantime, for those who are forced to participate in Ramadan against their will, I have a video about tips to get through Ramadan, and hopefully, I'll share more of them as we continue to speak during these live streams. So, yeah, just hang in there. If you're doing Ramadan against your will, hang in there, and hopefully someday you can do it voluntarily or not do it at all.
That sounds like a plan. Hopefully, you
Yeah.
will get to have access to that kind of choice, because I understand some people don't even have the the luxury of that kind of choice.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I can't think of anything else that I wanted to mention. We wanted to talk about the scientific method. I think we already touched on that. Nothing in particular comes to mind for me right now. Is there?
There was a comment
Mhm.
in the section. So I can't see the comments on StreamYard, but every now and then I glance on YouTube. There was a comment about somebody, Brendan Tristel, is talking about the fMRI showing something about states of mind is meaningless. Don't know if you can see that, but no, it is not meaningless. And this is where we talk about the scientific method. So Brenda, the fMRI showing something about states of mind is meaningless as far as proof of anything. Um, this doesn't make sense. The fMRI, the functional MRI, right now is being used to understand the connection, the efficiency of neurons, and how synapses are formed, and the efficiency of all these reactions happening. You can see areas of the brain where you're going through a spiritual or an exciting, or you tell a lie, or this is very important. This is part of science. Unless you don't think that science matters, and it means nothing because it's actually provided evidence that the spiritual experience is similar to that of an artistic or sportive one, and therefore it's kind of less meaningful. I'm not saying it's less meaningful. I'm just saying you can replicate the same feeling secularly. You don't and it's so it doesn't actually sort of undermine your religious experience. What it does, it says a secular person who doesn't believe in God is able to replicate the same experience without going to the supernatural. But comments like that sort of worry me, because you throw away the whole science method because it doesn't work with your narrative. And we know that science works, because if it doesn't, then you wouldn't be on your PC or your phone using quantum mechanics for the electron that is used in all electronics to work. So without quantum mechanics that works, and we still don't know much about, things like what we're doing right now wouldn't be possible. So
But what if
we
they're to advocate for the commenter here? What if they're saying that it doesn't necessarily, like, seeing that fMRI or seeing a goosebump doesn't invalidate that this is a real emotion or communication with God that the person is experiencing, and that it manifests in the physical world as as an fMRI image, as activity in a certain part of the brain. What do you think about that?
Well, that needs to be sort of verified. I mean, all what we're doing is these people are going through these experiences, and you show them pictures and you show them videos of certain things that they like. It could be the Quran, or it could be pictures of Jesus, or the crucifixion, or something like that, and you just let them be, and you invoke the emotions, and you have a look at the brain. And that's what the brain. So you can say, well, correlation doesn't mean causation. At some point, which is I agree with, but if you start doing this at 1,000, 100,000 samples, and the results are consistent, then you will have to start connecting it, and you use abductive logic, where you have two competing hypotheses, and then the data, and if the data has been explained by one of them, then you must go by it. For now, until it's proven differently. So I would like to understand what is what's been oppositely alleged here. What are you saying? In what happens then? Because this is what we can see, and that's what science deals with. Science deals with what you can see, and it works every time we use the scientific method to build our lives around. Like Richard Dawkins once said before, you build airplanes on the aerodynamics sort of systems. It flies. You build cars according to science. They drive rockets. They launch out of Earth. The science works. It works. On the other hand, as Dan Barker would have said, nothing feels like a prayer. Has prayers, as far as we know, there are thousands of people praying for a certain oppressed people to be relieved from their sufferings by the millions around the mosque and all sort of the Middle East, and unfortunately, it's not stopping.
Mhm.
So I don't know what to think. You tell me.
I think if there is some sort of correlation or physical manifestation of God speaking to someone through, for example, brain activity, if we can interpret that to mean that God is actually in communication with that person, then that would be very, very interesting data. If we can then compare it to different gods speaking to different people, and maybe false communications by God as like what's it called in a scientific study, as a control group, for
Yeah.
example. These sorts of things would be very interesting to see if we presume that this is actually a manifestation of the metaphysics. Then what can we do with that presumption? And that would still gain a lot of interesting
But
insights.
the funny thing, AA, is you got to believe in that God first for it to manifest and show. So if you believe in Jesus and you have Jesus' image in front of you, and by the way, it's true for that's why we think it is. All these religions are claiming the same thing, yet they all have the same manifestation in the brain. So for a Hindu, when he's faced by Brahma or Ganesh, they have the same manifestation if somebody is believing in Jesus, looking at Jesus.
Mhm.
So they either have to all be true, or it's our suggestive power. If we believe something so strongly, like cheering for Liverpool is objectively true. I know I picked Liverpool for whatever reason in the 80s, and I stuck by them. And now we have an Egyptian guy, because I'm half Egyptian, so I've got now a double bias, and he's doing wonders for Liverpool. Does that make Liverpool objectively true that it is the best team in the world? No, it's just a team that I go for, and I feel something when they win, and I feel something when they lose. So right,
Mhm.
but the same thing will happen to somebody who is going for Arsenal. Will feel
Yeah.
the same sort of. So that's what I'm saying. For gods, for all these competing gods, it would have been perfectly then curious if if an atheist would show a certain god and not others, and will show a certain manifestation that is different than other gods. and they go, oh, bloody hell. Something happens every time I show Ahura Mazda, the Persian dualist god, to Hani. And oh, there must be something going on there. What's going on? Then we will have a word.
Yeah, I could think of so many experiments that would be interesting to run, by getting a bunch of people who believe in different things and showing them these symbols and switching them around. That would be very interesting to see the results of.
Yeah.
Um,
Give them like a placebo as well, like that sugar coated tablet that doesn't have an active ingredient C, if they're still going to be generous, like with the oxytocin nasal spray, to see people become generous after they're given um, the um, the hugging hormone.
mhm. Um, so if there was imagine a placebo for atheism. Like if we told people, if you take this pill, you stop believing in God. Do you think that pill would work on some people just because of the power of placebo?
Uh, this is incredible. If I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this one here. So you a religious person or a non-religious person that's been given the tablet?
I mean, let's construct the experiment this way: a religious person, and obviously, if it's under their free will, then they wouldn't take the tablet, right? Because they don't want to be less religious. But let's assume they were forced to take a tablet. And I'm not advocating for forcing anybody to take anything, but in this hypothetical, um, a bunch of religious people forced to take a tablet, a placebo, and they were told this makes you less religious or atheist. Do you think that because of the power of suggestibility, some of them might actually renounce religion or become atheist?
Well, see, this is the human brain is so complex, and people are so complex. Some people probably be gagging for it, and I mean, and they were waiting for something like this to happen to go, oh, it worked. But they probably have some stuff happening in the background of their life anyway, and they will use that to remove the headache. Like they think it's a Panadol, but it's not. But they were gagging for it. So the human psychology and the human brain is so complex. Like it takes ages for one to know. Like it takes ages for you to understand yourself. And sometimes you do something, you go, "What the hell did I just do now?" And you kind of dwell on it, and you don't understand why you've done what you've done. It's so many hidden biases and hidden motives and bits and pieces, and we almost like discover ourselves through the journey. It's like as you do something, and then you discover something about you that you didn't know. Like most coward people, they go, "Oh, he's a coward. I'm brave. Look at me, I'm doing." And then something happens, and that person claims to be the bravest of all will flee the scene, and that person who was perceived to be small and coward and never stood up to anything is actually standing there and helping somebody who's injured. And you go, what happened just there? What happened there? This was playing differently in my mind. When it came to action, something different has manifested. So I would not trust something like that. I think believing in God or disbelieving in God needs to happen over a period of time. People need to take their time, needs to have a proper justification for them, and do it. That's why I think it's done slowly. I have people coming to my podcast sometimes and say, "Oh, your argument convinced me. I'm leaving God now." So, well, hold on a second. What are you doing? You're just gagging for it or what? You wait, because I have a problem with people leaving very, very quickly or entering very, very quickly.
Mhm.
They're, these are very important issues. People need to take their time, and I'm very suspicious about people who just change their minds superficially about something, because they're probably going to end up doing something, going back to it, back to Islam or Christianity, because so it looks like these are emotionally driven decisions, and I don't like them. I prefer the slow, analytical, intellectual approach to big questions like that.
So don't take the atheism pill if someone gave it to you.
No.
Um, Last super chat I'm going to read before we wrap up. Mustafa, thank you. Mustafa Jav says, I have a theory that the afterlife would just be our final thoughts as we die, since we can't comprehend death cognitively. For instance, paradise/nirvana. I've had a similar theory, well, not even a theory, just a hypothetical. What if our afterlife is just a gallery that you get to view your favorite moments or your best moments from your life and relive them, or just experience them for as many times as you want till you decide to let go. That would be an interesting way to have an afterlife without actually resurrecting anyone. Just, a viewing gallery of your life and its best moments. Uh, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this one, or my idea of the afterlife?
I mean, this is again, I'm going through sort of against the grain here. Um, I think afterlife is overrated. I don't understand why people want to live forever. I've never understood it. Um, I think that I think at some point there, I think there was a movie again about vampires who was supposed to be living forever, and they, after the first 2,000 years, they were sick of it. Kane, the guy with the mark on his forehead, and I think it was in the Netflix series Lucifer, where he's walking around trying to get killed because he's just had enough. He's like, okay, everybody I love, they end up dying. I see a lot of agony. I mean, at some point you go, okay, well, I've had intercourse 10 billion times. Okay, now I feel nothing. Well, especially if you're in heaven, this has to be the most boring existence ever. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the things that makes life interesting is the contrast. You know, you you fail sometimes, but when you gain something, you go, bloody hell, that's brilliant. I've made it. But if it's a flatliner of misery or a flatliner of happiness, I think it will end up being so boring for me. So I think I look forward to the point where I go back to where I came from, which is nothingness. And that'll be enough. So right now I'm focusing on the experience that I've got right now. If there is an afterlife, then I'll be pleasantly surprised, maybe. I don't know how I'd feel about that. I just need to understand the proposition. But for now, I'm quite content with the fact that I'm going to cease to exist one day, and I'm quite all right with it.
I've had to make peace with that idea because I went from believing that there is an afterlife to believing that there's no good reason to believe in the afterlife. Or no, let me rephrase that. There's no good, there's no compelling evidence or reason for me to believe in the afterlife. Of course, there are a lot of reasons why it would be compelling to believe in an afterlife, but none of them make it seem likely to me. It just makes it seem like a nice idea. So unfortunately, I don't believe in it. Um, but I've come up with a few different ideas of, if I were to experience an afterlife, what would I want it to look like? And it's mostly it's not really much like the one described in Islam. I would want to, first of all, be, immune to death for a while, and just experience everything that this life has to offer that I couldn't experience in my limited time on this earth, up until I get bored, or up until I think, okay, this is enough for me. I don't know what limitations I would have in that hypothetical. Uh, but I would want to travel the world. I would want to basically do a lot of things that I can do today, not on the same scale, and not, with the same level of, I have all the money in the world, I could do whatever, but I can experience a bite of all of this. And to want to
Yeah.
experience everything always, or everything to its fullest extent, is to some extent greed. And I shouldn't be greedy with life. So I should enjoy this life, the delicacies that this life has to offer, because my idea of the afterlife is basically this times 1,000. So why can't I just enjoy this if there is no afterlife? Like, it's my way of bargaining with myself. There is no afterlife, but this life can be great.
Yeah. Well, there is a belief already, like in sort of in those sort of lines, the reincarnation. It's just in reincarnation, you can't be guaranteed what sort of life form you come into. So you could be, an owl, or you can be a rock, you can be anything. And it depends on where are you in the scale of the caste system, which is horrible, by the way. It has horrible repercussions on the human living. Um, the but you've no knowledge or no previous experience of your previous self. So imagine, because we know now, we like, unless people talk about deja vus and say, oh, deja vu must be a sign that we've lived before. But as Christopher Hitchens once said, notice that everybody that used to have a previous experience, they always been like a prince or princess, or a noble person. They're never So that's basically their imagination manifesting in a certain way, and deja vu has a scientific thing because there's a lag, there's a buffer between you're thinking about something and it comes to your perception. That lag can cause what we call deja vu.
Mhm.
There's a buffer. There's a buffer in everything. Like when we're talking about the sounds of God saying something be and it will be, um, uh, even the speed of light is a lot faster than the speed of sound, right? Yet there is a lag in the speed of light, right? So if I'm looking at you right now, it's taking fragments of a second to see you because I'm looking at the photons reflecting back onto me. So I'm always seeing you in the past,
Mhm.
always, and that's with the speed of light. The speed of sound is even slower. We literally always live in the past.
Yep.
Everything you see, everything you hear, everything, the buffer, the idea that emerges in your mind few seconds before actually you become aware of it. Like before you go and think I'm thirsty, I need water, that idea has already emerged in your subconscious fragments of seconds before, and then you became aware of it. Too much for free will. I mean, so much for free will. That's
Mhm.
another conversation to be had, but
Yeah.
it tells you that you pretty much looking at the past one way or another.
That's that's interesting, isn't it? That we live in the past, but we always worry about the future, especially the far, far future after our life. So just enjoy the present, or as Henny says, enjoy the past, I guess, because the present is the past. And
It
yeah,
is.
make the best of the life that you do have, because as far as we know, there isn't another one. And it would be nice, to have another life where you meet all your loved ones and dead ones and everything, but we have to live as if there isn't, and whatever else we get is a bonus, if
Mm-hmm.
we get anything, which we probably won't. But I'm not worried about an afterlife. That's a question that I get a lot, including from Muslim relatives. Is, are you worried that if it turns out to be true that there is an afterlife? I don't think I am, unless there is a tyrant God that is lying about his description of being all merciful and all wise and all that kind of stuff. And at that point, what use would worrying
No
do?
guarantees.
Yeah, and I only have this time up until he gets to me and like really tortures me for the rest of eternity. So this is my heaven, my one breath of fresh air. That's the only thing I could do. And assuming that it's a God with a bit of intelligence and some degree of fairness and objectivity, and doesn't actually take it very personally that I don't believe in its existence, I would understand my perspective. Then I think I'm doing okay. I'm trying to be a good person. I'm trying to help people around me, and I'm not saying I deserve heaven, but I know I don't deserve eternal torture, so I'm not too worried.
Oh, I think nobody deserves eternal torture. Does even the worst of us.
Yeah, but that's a topic for another day, because that also we could talk about for a long time.
For
Um,
sure.
Yeah, it was really fun chatting with you again as last time, and I feel like we got to speak about a lot more topics this time, and I'm
Yeah.
glad that we had this chat. Thank you for reaching out again and reminding me that we were overdue in having this chat.
Thank you, A. And I want to say one last word in your
Mm.
and not just because I'm here on your channel, but because I've been following your work, and I understand where you come from on different topics, and I think the fact that you're human first, and then a lot of things sort of follow, and you're trying to stick to that, is very very underrated. And I agree with you on pretty much a lot of things that you're saying, even your stances on multiple things that maybe caused some havoc in the past. Um, but what I need people to understand, especially people who cheer for different camps, is it's okay to have different opinions. It's all right. It's okay to even have a debate about something because that's healthy. If you say, I see things that way because one, two, and three. What say you? And somebody else will come up with a counter and stuff like that. This is very enriching to the human experience. Those who are cheering on the sideline by saying, "Oh, this guy's a Richard head, and this guy is just he's a paid Mossad," you know, they're not helping the situation. the real people who would be actually sort of debating the conversations you're having, the cons and the pros, and say, okay, well, he's got a point here, but maybe this one here I don't agree with. That is healthy. But for people to start taking sides and go back to the tribalistic behavior that we're supposed to have departed from to reach a new point of critically probe every idea on its own merit and not joining certain groups because of a certain popularity or a certain size, or then you are going back to what you've left. So be careful of that bias, and don't care about who's saying whatever the idea they're saying. You need to grab the idea and you're gonna look at the cons and the pros and evaluate the situation as it is, and don't go back to where you left.
Thank you for saying that. I want to remind people, if you I don't want anyone to agree with me or learn something from me or follow in my footsteps merely because they like me or because they like Hani. They should assess what I'm saying, what we're saying, and think, do they agree with it or do they not? It's not about a popularity contest, and it's not about taking sides on just I take this person's side or this group's side no matter what they do. So yeah, I as always I encourage people to think critically and think for themselves, and it doesn't mean agree with me because you like me. It means if you think I'm right, then you agree with me.
As a matter of fact, AA, they should, if you like somebody so much, you actually should doubt them twice, because you're too biased, because you will accept their ideas because you like them. So if I like somebody, like I love Christopher Hitchens, and it took me a while to understand that his stance on the Iraq War was incorrect. And I've retained my respect for him and love for him, knowing that he's not perfect. And I was okay with that, because it's okay to disagree with a hero of yours on a couple of things. What's the big deal? You know, that's life.
Yeah. I haven't read enough of Hitchens to say that I'm a fan, but I am aware of his controversial opinions as well, and that is why I tell people, um, it's not good to brand yourself as a follower of Hitchens, for example, which most people don't do. It's actually ascribed to atheists and presumed about atheists. A lot of people have told me, "So you think Hitchens is better than Muhammad or something?" And I'm like, "I don't even know Hitchens." Um, but yeah, it's not about people, it's about ideas. So no matter who you idolize, they're gonna have a flaw. They're gonna have an opinion that is not the correct opinion. No one's ever correct all the time. And that's not just to dismiss his bad opinions as like, oh well, he made a mistake. No, you can scrutinize anyone to any extent. So yeah, don't take idols, learn from people, scrutinize your heroes, even your idols, your teachers, so to
Mhm.
speak. And yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to say the catchphrase to wrap up this live stream. Think critically and think for yourself. Thank you again, Hani, for joining us, and hope to see you again sometime soon.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you very much, AA, and thank you very much your wonderful audience. You've got very intelligent people in your stream, posing very good questions. Even the faithful, very respectful, and you're blessed with good people around you.
Thank you. I'm very glad to know that. And yeah, and again, I can't show it on the screen today, technical limitations, but thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting this channel. I could not do this without you. And take care, everyone, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.